not having a lot of
no,
schemes
the fund that is currently big enough, NSSF, doesn't target the informal sector. Okay, currently, well, because now they have really come up with the voluntary contributions, where they allow anyone, regardless of where you are employed, to contribute. So that also is looking at targeting the informal sector. But remember, that is voluntary, it is not mandatory. Okay. So you're actually leaving these people in the informal sector to just decide, well, if you want to contribute to your pension, you do. If you don't want, it's up to you. Which I still think is not really fair. If you're going to come up with a public policy, the policy should be seen
to capture
everyone.
Yeah.
Yes, at least make an attempt to capture everyone. But if you're going to say, okay, for those that are employed, your safeguards, it is actually mandatory for you to contribute to be able to be protected when you cannot help yourself. But then for these people, the majority of the population, yeah, if you say about 80% of Uganda's labor force is in the informal sector, so where are those schemes that actually target these people? So that's where the problem is. We have formal biased interventions, yet we have a population that is largely informal in nature. So my thoughts really here is, if we are going to target women, if we're going to see women protected and being able to participate in these schemes to help them in times when they cannot support themselves, in times when there's, COVID-19 happened. Women in the informal sector, or generally in the informal sector, people were not protected.
Businesses were almost down to them.
Yeah, businesses were almost down. You have women going off for maternity leave. They never get any kind of cover. So if you're not going to go to your stall, you're not going to earn. And there is nothing that is being set aside to actually support you during this process, during this period when you're actually not working. And that is the role, that should be the role of Social Security. When someone with disability, you get, we are prone,
incapable.
Yeah, we are prone to accidents in this country.
In the work line.
Yes.
At a particular point in time. Yes. It is these funds that should be able to
exactly.
come to aid.
But because there are no interventions in place for women to actually participate, yeah, or people in the informal sector to participate in these schemes. So there are no safeguards for them. And that puts them at risk of becoming vulnerable to risks and shocks we are vulnerable to shocks. We saw it, like I said, COVID-19 came and we were thrown off balance. Yeah, so if we had proper schemes in place, then probably the impact might have been mitigated. Yeah, but then also one would say, usually the argument is the informality of the informal sector makes it very hard to have these people, it would be easy for someone who is in a workplace that is well-structured, formal in nature, because they know at the end of the month, your employer would be able to remit your contribution to NSSF. But where do you find a hawker who was here today on this street, and then the next day they are not here? So that kind of the informality, it's
no one that has a database.
Yeah, it's hard.
Where,
exactly.
Who hawks when and how much do they?
Exactly. So there are all those challenges. Yeah, there are all those challenges, but nonetheless, there are schemes that are running in this, targeting these kinds of people. The Mazima scheme, then the Kasita scheme, but those really currently they have less than 5,000 members on those schemes. And of course, right now, the Uganda Retirement Benefits Regulatory Authority, which is the regulator for these kinds of schemes, is using these two schemes as pilots to see how feasible is it to use these kinds of schemes to be able to tap the informal sector, where women are actually largely are. So if it turns out that actually these schemes have performed or provide evidence that actually you can use such models to tap these, because it's not like the NSSF where you'll have a percentage and maybe you're supposed to pay it at this time. So these schemes work in such a way that they respond to one's specific abilities. Yeah. So if, for instance, they know, well, maybe a hawker, you can earn your money, like you get a daily income. So they will not wait for the month to end. So they will allow contributions like on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. So coming up with those targeted interventions that are tailor-made to the needs of this particular population, I think that will go a long way to actually help us go around this whole, I call it an excuse of informality. Yeah, go around this whole, and then be able to tap this population. Because yes, these people, we all need social security. We all come to a point in time when we need support, when we cannot offer our labor. But then, so what happens? Because you know what happens? The burden, if you do not make these people participate or contribute to their own social security when they can, then the taxpayer is going to bear that burden.
Absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, you're going to have more people that do not have any kind of social security.
And it will be upon government
yes.
to meet them.
Because it is their duty.
And government generates these funds from
yes.
the tax we have to collect, yet these funds would be channeled to other
exactly.
forms of service.
But it would also mean that you'll have more people that are retiring to the senior citizens grant. Currently it's being given to 85-year-olds and above, and it is about 25,000. So we have right now it's taking care of about 350,000 at a very huge bill. So, and government is actually still struggling to cover that bill, which is only 350,000. So imagine we have more people that are retiring and they are retiring in poverty. So government will definitely have to take them up and enroll them on the senior citizens grant. Okay. And yet you had an opportunity when they were still productive to make sure that they contribute to their own social security or their own pension.
Right.
Yes.
And how does all these aspects, like you mentioned out in NSSF, we have ruled out the fact that there are not as much women as the men
yes.
in the workspace. And even though they are, there are not as much of those that are being paid on a quotidian, so that this is gotten out. It yes. is general. We have ruled out the fact that they are more on this other informal end. How about the public pension scheme? Do these factors project in this scheme as well? The factors mentioned in NSSF? Yes,
I think what generally what we have to appreciate is the woman getting into a workplace is really, well, they have been there, but it's really been a recent, you'd have more women in the public service now than they used to be back then. Mm-hmm. So it would still mean that you actually have fewer women in the public service than men. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the whole, the debates around gender equality and having actually changed, because it has come with a change of perceptions where parents actually appreciate that even having my girl child go to school is important. So if we've been dealing with those issues, it tells you that actually at the end of the day, we're going to have less women in the formal employment. Yeah, well, the trend is changing. We're having more women actually in formal employment. We're having more women taking up roles in all these different, but at the moment, yes, even the public service pension scheme will have more males than women. Yeah, so it still reflects in those spheres. But you know, and I think as sometimes some of these issues cannot be separated from a whole, you have to look at them in entirety. So if you're going to say, well, there's been challenges on girl child education, at the end of the day, what does that mean? That will mean that you're going to actually have fewer women taking up jobs that require an education.
So it's these small things that we keep
Exactly.
Keeping a blind eye on
exactly.
the
So
grassroots that become the bigger problem.
exactly.
It's
So
a trickle-up effect.
Exactly. We tend to look at the top and forget that there is a root down here. There is where all these things are stemming from. So if you do not invest, for example, if you don't invest in children right now, even what we're talking about, productive population, even so, you will still have a very limited number of people that are actually productive.
UNEP itself has already recorded a worry that more than ever they've seen reduction in numbers, especially when it comes to gender. The girls that are sitting for final examinations, especially senior 4 that began this week, is really low, and that reduction has not been recorded in the past 10 years. Of course, with factors of COVID-19.
Yes,
these girls went home, they were with their oppressors. Some are pregnant, others are mothers already, and priorities of them leaving all that and coming to school. You know, it's quite probable, even with initiatives of UNEP putting up extra time for these learners to write
it is actually for those that are there. So if you've not come, then it's not for you.
You will find it difficult to convince a parent down there that is already angry of a child, already looking at them as a gone case. With the factors that went on, to think about taking them to school, that they still chance. You understand? So I don't know how we're going to respond to this, but
you know, it has
it's going to project in about 10 years.
Definitely.
It's going to project.
Definitely. It's going to be a very huge impact.
That it was a turnaround of events in 2020.
Yes, you know, it has actually been a big problem, transition rates. You know, you come to P7, you actually see huge numbers. From P7 to senior 4, there will be a drop.
We have not responded to what happens
from there. Senior 4 to senior 6, there will be a drop.
We still don't respond.
And then you're wondering, okay, where are these cracks? So that there are cracks in the system, and children keep falling through.
And we don't notice.
We don't try to probe to find out what exactly. So those transition rates at the end of the day affect the productivity of the country.
Absolutely.
You're going to have a workforce that is not productive. You're going to have
not balanced.
You have a productive that is heavily dependent. So we have a very high dependency burden. So but still that will come on how much can someone, especially the people that are in informal sector, if they have a very heavy dependency burden, they're taking care of so many kids, how much money are they going to set aside for future use?
Okay, Gloria, allow me to put a pause on that. When we do return, we're going to be putting all these factors into perspective and giving you a projection of what it will actually mean. A woman of today, probably in your 30s or coming to your 40s, what will it mean when you clock 50 or 60 with all these factors constant? When you're not registered or you're not inclusive in the National Social Security Fund, in the public pension scheme, you're not anywhere registered. What will that mean for you in those years? We'll be doing that after the messages.
Smart24. Smart Business.
Amanya gange nze Mbulu Grace nkola bwa kondakita. Nali kale kasazi nkola bwa kondakita okuva kafyo yajja nkola bwa kondakita naye nga nali nvuga. Omulimu guno mazemu emyaka nga 8. Ebingi byenfunyemu kale bingi byenfunyemu ebitontono. Funyemu kuba nagulamuko ka ploti ne kanyamba kati awo sinazimba. Bisomozo bingi bannaye abantu betusanga ku makubo bana ababeerako nga bayita emmotoka baba bazibu nnyo. Bazibu nnyo batuuka ku stage ne bakubadde wagenda wansi novuga nokira wansi. Ate oteka ku stage nosasulawo sente nyingi kwegamba nekimpisawo binnyo. Ate omusabaze asobola otula nga awulidde sente z'omugamye nti munaye sinjira 10 ovaayo n'akuwa 5. Omusabaze n'omuyita nti munaye jangu tugende inegenda n'akuyitako n'agenda wansi n'agenda wansi nayimire dakiika 3 n'agana okutula mu motoka eri ku stage. Kale obwo bwe busomoze bwe tufuna. Abagagga bazibu nnyo. Omugagga atukera ku makya n'akuwa mmotoka n'akugamba ati njagala 9,000 bw'otaziweeza n'akiwulira bubi ate ng'abantu tebakyaliyo ku makubo. Kati kwegamba tufuna okusomoozebwa ng'okwo osanga omu n'aleega 10,000 naye olw'okuba nti oyagala okukola naye nga n'essente tomanyi ogenda kuzijja naye olw'okuba nti oyagala okukola n'ogamba waaye kanjizuule nkoleko mpolampola tomanyaako ziyinza okulabika naye ogenda okulaba biseemu ne zigaana okukola ki okulabika. Bwe buzibu bwe tufuna.
Smart24. Smart Business.
Welcome back from that short break. We are still journeying with us here on Smart Rise, and we're still discussing matters, social security, pension, and things along these lines, but particularly how they affect the women. How are women projecting or progressing in regards to this? Now, before we went to the break, Gloria and I had established a few facts and factors contributing to those. Now, let's get to what this means. What will become of these women that, first of all, do not have security for themselves, don't have items or assets per se, when they clock that elderly age where they cannot be productive in terms of the workforce?
You know, it's I mean, the one answer one would say is they are retiring into poverty. So you just have this population that is working right now, and at retirement, they're retiring into poverty. And you know, right now, the current state of older persons, mostly our older persons, well, in a kind of setting, old age is associated with vulnerability. Old age is associated with poverty. So you have about, studies show about 85% of older persons are living in chronic poverty. So it tells you that what we've been doing has not been preparing our population for that particular age, the age after working, the age after being productive. So but then the challenge is you have these old people but they're still heads of households. They're taking care of children, probably orphans. Yeah, and of course the argument has been, we have had, they call it a lost generation. So that generation that was taken away due to HIV AIDS.
Yeah.
So most of these children were left behind, and these ended up being taken care of by the parents of those that passed on. So you have older people that are still heads of households because they have children that they had to raise. You have had a child, but then you still have to raise their children.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what now, that becomes quite complicated if you actually do not have a support, some kind of social security. Yeah, so it's you who has to take care of these children. So all the money that you get, yeah, but also you can tell most of these people really were equally vulnerable at the time, so they could only earn as much. So they are growing older, but not having been able to save, and now they are less productive. Mm-hmm. So you are less productive, you do not have any income on you, you do not have any kind of social security. What happens? Old age comes with all these kinds of demands,
yeah.
Illnesses, you need to go to the hospital almost on a monthly basis. Even transport to the hospital will become a challenge. Mm. But the other issue would be, when you go to the hospital, are they able to diagnose, are they able to give you the kind of prescription or even get the treatment? Well, now we are talking about public health facilities. Oh. Will they be able to get you the treatment that you need for your kinds of illnesses, old age related illnesses? Probably no. So are you able to access a private health facility? Probably no. What's your fate? So they end up in a very well, call it precarious situation. They have nowhere to run to, and yet, if we had prepared them enough, if there was a system in place whereby these people are able to, contribute, then probably they would be in a much, because that is the whole idea of social security, to be able to live a dignified life when you are not able to work.
One would argue this out, Gloria, and say, even as you work,
yes.
you save off money. In these modern day and times, we are working but saving aside money in form of assets.
Yes.
People buy land,
yes.
people buy cars, people have herds of cattle or animals or goats or chicken.
Yes.
So a side business per se, but in form of an asset. So that once you cannot go to an office or once you can't go to a store to sit and maybe sell a few items
yes.
for your income, it is these assets that probably are going to look after you. Probably if you have a plot of land, you'll have constructed a house, or you'll be growing some crops on it. So
yes.
really, let's discuss that in terms of asset acquisition, those things that can take care of someone's older age.
Yes.
How does that? How is that portrayed in the women, in the women of late?
Yeah,
asset acquisition.
There's been. I had a discussion with one of the members of the Uganda Women Entrepreneurs Association. UWEL, I think that should be. Yeah, and she was telling me there is a growing trend of women, because previously it would really be hard for women to really acquire assets or own land or things like that. But she was telling me increasingly women are actually acquiring assets. They're getting land, and land that is titled in their names. So yeah, you could say that in a way someone has like a fallback. Yeah, in case things do not work out, they have a fallback. But usually the question is, investing in assets really is a good thing. Yeah, it is a good thing. But I think what we do not want to bank on that as our, because fine, you'll have your land, yes, but you still need other things for your life to go on even when you're on your land. Are you going to sell off your land? So if you sell off your land, then what? And you know that has been the biggest problem with NSSF in its current form. So you have people that have saved for these so many years. So they retire, you get all their money, 100 million maybe, give it to them. And trust me, and this has been, NSSF has done studies, and they tell you that within 2 years, that money is usually spent. So does it serve the purpose? Probably no. Because at the end of the day, you're going to now go back to zero.
Yeah.
You're going to go back to zero. You've blown the money. Let's be honest with ourselves. Our economy is very unpredictable. So you say, are they going to give me my 100 million? I'm going to invest it in a business. What are the chances that, well, they say our businesses collapse after, do not graduate after the second year. So what are the chances that you're actually going to invest it in something that will be able to sustain you for the next 20 years? Because on average, people live about 10, 15 years in retirement. So how feasible or how sure are you that something that you're going to invest in with the money that you've got from NSSF is going to run you for the next, give you an income for the next 10, 15 years? That's also the other problem with the NSSF, because in its current form, it is not a pension scheme. Yeah. Like you'd say a public service pension scheme, because then you'll get money until you die.
Every once in a while.
But this, guys, for the NSSF, it is a provident fund. And for a provident fund, they give you a lump sum.
At a go.
Yeah, you get all your money.
Once you clock that age.
But then also the other thing you have to appreciate is given the low incomes that we earn in this country, at the end of the day, you'll find that someone has contributed to the fund for about 20 years. So they usually say, on average, the payout at NSSF is about 15 million shillings. 15 million shillings, you are going into retirement. Yeah. So what are you going to do with 15 million shillings? But that also now tells you the problems. Now that comes back to the labor market problem, labor market challenges. So if you have very little incomes, because yeah, it is a percentage of what you earn. So if you're earning 400,000,
chances are high you will not think about saving, because that is already within your survival budget.
Okay, now we're looking at the mandatory one. So you earn 400,000. Your employee will put for you your 10%. You'll bring your 5%. Is 10% of 400,000, 5%. So 15% of 400,000. How much is that? And so at the end of the day, you realize that actually you might have been saving all this long, but there's not much that you've actually saved. So you're going to give you your 10, 15, 20 million at the end of the period. That is what you have to go with. But of course, that shouldn't, but those are the majority, because there is that what they call, is it 70-30, whereby the biggest percentage of the fund, or 70% of the fund is owned by 30% of the people. So you have a very small percentage of the membership who actually own, because they earn very huge salaries. Yeah. They earn very big salaries, and so they're able to save more. So for you, when you look at the fund in its entirety, like, whoa, it used to be 9 trillion shillings. These are 9 trillion shillings. But whose money is that? It is just for a very small percent of the members. So still, even the people that are in NSSF, they may not be safe, secure at the moment. So that's why actually I think as a country we need like a whole reforms, pension sector reforms, whereby we actually look at the needs of our population. We look at our people, who we are, yeah. I mean, we have all these ideas. We know funds like these have worked in different countries. But the question is, do they respond to the needs of the Ugandan? Do they respond to the needs of the Ugandan workforce? Because that is what a good social security scheme should be. It should be able to respond to the specific needs of the given population. So if NSSF now is targeting formal employment, but where are the majority of the Ugandans? Majority of the Ugandans are the informal sector. Can we make NSSF tap into this particular segment of the workforce? Well, those are the debates they're having. How do we tap into them? Are we going to use the same model as is right now, as NSF is using? Definitely no.
Absolutely
you will
not.
not get the people to give you a monthly contribution. So maybe, how about a daily contribution? How about giving a weekly contribution? How about giving as much as according to my abilities? Or how are you going to look at us, for instance, hawkers, for instance? You say, okay, now for this particular group, this is the model you're going to use to be able to. There's an example someone was sharing, I think is in Tanzania, one of those countries, where they have these small schemes. So you collect your money. You know, like what used to happen, the Niginas. Yeah. So those groups, they're very interesting groups. But you know, of course, at the end of the day, they will blow up all the money. They would spend it on maybe when it comes to, I think they used to have like, was it Christmas or so? Usually, what those groups do is at the end of the year, they redistribute the money. Everyone gets their money. They go have fun, then start from zero. It's a good model. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really, it's a model that could actually...
does not respond to the retirement age needs.
Yes. So it's such models that could actually be taken advantage of. You can build on those. For instance, if these people...
remodify.
Yes. If these people are collecting about, let's say, maybe let's be generous. Let's say at the end of the year, they're going to have 5 million shillings. Is it possible that NSS can actually provide a window whereby these people put part of that money to NSSF and as a saving, as their own kind of social security? So you have to look at what is happening in the community and be able to use those, because people are able to, people can easily...
day-to-day circles.
Exactly, the day-to-day circles. And
Boda men have their own circles.
So
people that work
small,
together,
small
you
groups.
find that they always have, you know, forms of saving money.
Yes, and someone was actually saying that women are always in groups. Somehow, the question is, what are they doing in the group? So take advantage of the fact that women are always in groups and help them or guide them, not even helping them, but guide them to achieve a particular purpose. So maybe for them, well, but also maybe the other thing we have to look at is sensitization. Because even from the basic saving, putting aside a 1,000 shillings a week,
it's not a culture that
really, So how about we actually need to come up with kind of a social behavioral change strategies. So behavioral change strategies, how do you influence perceptions and help people appreciate that social security is a core aspect of your livelihood or well-being? At the end of the day, you need to be safeguarded. Yeah, so the issue of sensitization, we need to help people appreciate some of these things. They seem, when someone hears about social security, they think, NSSF, those things are for the people in offices, those things. No, they're not. These are things about you. This is your life.
Okay.
So, but how do you make this seemingly abstract concept appeal to someone who is earning a daily wage and they're just looking at the next meal? So how do you make them appreciate that, you know what, you can actually put aside some money for the rainy day?
All right, Gloria, seems like time is not on our side, but in around 2 minutes, let's understand what Uganda Parliamentary Forum is doing about all this. Are they aware, and what strides are being made?
Yeah, oh well, as the forum, of course, we do a lot of influences at a policy level. Yeah, the fact that we work with policymakers. And so what we are doing right now, is especially for the next 5 years, what we intend, our advocacy agenda, because currently it has been around SAGE, the Senior Citizens Grant. So one could proudly say that the forum has actually delivered that, because now we have the Senior Citizens Grant rolled out nationwide. Yeah, of course, there are changes that need to be done, especially on the age of eligibility. You can't tell me you're targeting 80 years and above. How many 80 years and above do we have in this country? So you're leaving behind so many vulnerable people. So that is also still on our agenda to ensure that actually the age of eligibility is brought down to about 65. And that is a commitment that government actually made. So we are only asking government to implement, act as per their commitment. So, but then going forward, we're looking at advocacy around social protection for informal sector workers. Yeah, so we're looking at how do we develop policies or ensure that we have interventions in place that help people in the informal sector get some kind or participate in social security. And of course, the other thing we're looking at is to come up with a Social Protection Act. Yeah, so in that act, we know it, you know, when you have it as a law, you can easily implement it. You can easily hold government accountable because there is a law in place. So we're looking at coming up with pushing for a Social Protection Act so that we have all these things clearly stated, highlighted, and provisions made. So if you, for instance, because social protection is really a life cycle, so you're looking at children. So after being a child, actually let's start from pregnant mothers. So you're a woman. So what is there to ensure that actually this woman is safe? So now things of health insurance come in. So you're looking at children. So we need to make sure that children are protected. They're able to actually get the best when it comes to health. They're able to access the best health facilities. They're able to get the best education. And then, so after that, you're looking at young people. Do we have employment opportunities? How have we protected our young people in that productive age? Yeah, so now you start to look at, so if you are looking at the working age population, what interventions have you put in place to ensure that people, and now we'll be really focusing on contributions. How do people contribute to their own social security? And then now after that, so it is retirement. So do we actually have we created a platform that ensures that when people retire, they retire they still are able to live relatively good lives. Yes, not retiring into poverty. So really that is what we're trying to look at, creating a system. So the key issue is to create a system, a social protection system, and that should be comprehensive enough to take care of an individual from the time they are in their mother's womb to the time they actually retire. That is that strategy.
All right, so we thank you so much for joining us. It's been very, very, sensitizing communication. I don't know about who is watching, but my mind has been triggered down to something. Unless you have something to close with.
Well, Women's Day is coming up, and I really think it shouldn't be another day to commemorate, celebrate, and move on. But we should be very deliberate on what do we actually want to see our women achieve. What do we want to see if we're going to talk about development? But development should be inclusive enough. It should be able to not leave anyone behind. That is women. And if you have the majority of your population as women, take advantage of that.
All right. Thank you so much for weighing in on all those issues, and I hope that you've been attentive and paying attention to some of these things that are important. Women's Day is coming, like Gloria is saying here, but it shouldn't be another day where we talk and we don't walk the talk. A lot is usually highlighted on such a day, but then we leave that at that and then do not implement. This is something that we should be able to take forward, and of course appreciations to the forum for the strides being made, but it also will take much to actually see the strides bear fruit. So make sure that as a person goes into retirement, be it a man or a woman, they are catered for with available, of course, forums or schemes or strategies, but also implementing them and changing a few of those, modifying them to make sure that they cater for each and everyone, not leaving anyone behind. Thank you so much for watching all throughout the week. From the team at Smart24 here, we thank you, and we will be back next week with more discussions and starting your days in the best way possible. My name is Gloria Nakajubi. Salam.